Hello, Tech SEO Boost. Thanks so much for coming, guys. I'm Nick Vining. I'm the Director of Strategy and Insights at Catalyst. I've been here every year since we've been doing this, and big thanks to Paul again, and thanks to all of you for coming and getting through the weather. And for the live stream folks, you're lucky. You should be lucky you're not here. All right, so we have a great panel here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But first, Eric.
I'm Derek Perkins with Nozzle. We've been here since the first year. We've been on panels every year, usually talking about helping SEOs and engineers to communicate. You may remember Tanner. He had long hair back then, and he insulted SEOs sometimes about how they communicate. And we do rank tracking.
I'm JR. I am the Senior Technical Director of SEO Research for an agency called Locomotive. We used to be called Adapt. Now we're Locomotive. Do a lot of, for the last few years, I've been trying to push the bridging of SEO and data science through a lot of work at the agency, as well as sharing code and whatnot on GitHub. I really have to give a big nod to Paul for what he's helped create here, because this is by far one of my favorite conferences of the year, just in terms of the quality of speakers and the quality of people that are attending.
Hi, I'm Claudia Higgins. I am the SEO Insight Manager for a large retailer in the UK called Argos. Been in-house there for 5.5 years now. And that's also the length of time that I've been in SEO, having come from the obvious SEO career path of primary, like elementary school teacher, and then tattoo artist, and then SEO. So this is my first time at the conference, and I'm already just overwhelmed by how much there is for me to learn here.
Awesome. And I'm Jordan Silton. I run the SEO team for Apartments.com, parent company CoStar Group. We have about 15 people that work on data science, analytics, technical SEO, content, and geographies. So all sorts of stuff.
Thanks, guys. If we could just pass the mic around. So when do you need custom SEO tools, right? So I'll start actually with Derek here. We really need more mics here. Okay, so we all run into this problem. When do you develop a tool versus when do you just use something that already exists? How many hours is it going to take you to develop that? So can you just talk a little bit about how you make that decision in that process?
So historically, I came from an agency background at SEO.com before starting Nozzle, a tools business. So I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I think the hardest thing to compete with when you're like at an agency or an enterprise is a tool can amortize the cost and development of whatever data science work or data collection across a large number of clients. And so it's often hard to make the economics work, especially if you're trying to get into a lot of ML work that's a lot of custom, potentially models being built per client. So for me, I think the right way to go about it is if you can, figure out what tools you're using, what your internal workflows look like, and stitch together data that you're collecting, kind of like we just saw from David. There's ways to, pull in these different APIs, like he said, like SERP API or these other tools can do some of the heavy lifting and data collection, and then focus on adding value or reducing the number of man hours you're working, at your agency. So for me, that's, focus really on the connection of your data and not the collection.
No, anyone else want to add to that? And no.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very similar. Like my focus is I don't like being locked in by a UX of a tool, right? Like I don't want to have what they give me. I want to be able to have what I want to have and what I need to have. So part of my process is just building APIs internally that give us the flexibility to pull what data we need when we need it for whatever purpose we want to use it for. And like Derek said, be able to stitch it together and come up with something that no one else has, essentially.
So I completely agree with these guys that it has totally been driven by workflow in our situation. So being in-house, a large part of our job is working with other internal teams and getting them to build SEO into what they're doing in their day-to-day business. And a lot of that comes through education. But if you're telling them you need to think about all these different aspects, here's the data for each of them, you need to log into this tool and then into this tool and then into this tool, and then check that you haven't gone down any wrong routes in any of those tools if you're not finding that they match up. It just doesn't happen. That they're going to pick one that they're comfortable with, and then that will be the only data source that they look at. So for us, it's been about making it much quicker and easier for other people working in the business who maybe aren't SEO specialists to be able to see all of the data that we're collecting, and so that we can get the most value out of what we're paying for.
Yeah, and one other wrinkle that I'll add is one thing that we deal with at apartments.com is we have a lot of proprietary data. And we're not necessarily going to upload that to the cloud or share it publicly or make it easy to join it with a script that's publicly accessible. So a lot of the work that we do and the tools that we build are like, how do we join our data internally and make use of it and connect it to some of these external libraries or APIs or whatever to get value.
Great. So, JR, maybe you could jump in real quick and describe just your tech stack and what kind of, why you chose, X, Y, and Z.
So we have a Jupyter Lab data server running on a pretty large AWS box that we've collaboratively as a company kind of built out different notebooks and workflows over the last couple of years. One of my main focuses was making connections. So if we needed something that crawled and scraped content from pages and extracted it in a certain way, or rendered pages, or pulled data from a SERP tracking tool, or pulled data from Search Console. I wanted to make those connections quick and easy to be able to wireframe some needed process up in a Jupyter notebook. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Jupyter, the interesting thing about that from a team concept or an agency concept is that it's essentially a web page that you can write to and execute code in. So it gives you the ability to say, this is how to run this. Run this cell first, then enter this information here, enter this information here, and then you get X output. So it allows you to stitch together documented processes, and it allows an analyst who maybe isn't as technical to go in, open that notebook, and actually follow the cells, enter the information, and then you have repeatable processes. But we're almost exclusively an AWS shop, except for a few things that we use, like rendering and BigQuery Google products for.
Want to add to that at all?
I mean, we're a .NET shop, but we use everything. We use AWS and Python and R and anything you can imagine. I think you have to have a team that's really well versed to be able to pick up whatever technology is most valuable or quickest or fastest or most efficient at solving a certain task.
Yeah.
You can't really be tied to one thing or another. I mean, you can probably do anything in a lot of these libraries now, but the more versatile you are, even at the basic level, the better.
Yeah. We were talking before this, and a lot of us realized that we use something a little differently, right? So we all have slightly different technology that we're utilizing. Like at Catalyst, you saw Paul using KNIME. We visualize things in Tableau. We use some Python, but I think it depends on what kind of challenges that you need to solve. So actually, speaking of that, Claudia, maybe you can jump in here. What kind of challenges are you facing right now, or what have you solved with the different tools that you've built?
So as I was mentioning earlier, one of the problems that I've been seeking to solve is the challenge of people outside the SEO team needing to do SEO research and not having the time to do it through the different out-of-the-box solutions that we've bought into. So it's about taking the outputs from those and surfacing them all in one go. For us, we've got a huge number of pages. We've got an index of about 5 million. We bring in millions of visits every week, and so being able to understand the entry points of all of our customers into our website, if something starts to look wrong, is really tricky unless you are able to quickly stitch together the different data points that you have, cut it in lots of different ways really quickly, and be able to diagnose and communicate up through the higher levels of management what's going wrong, why it's going wrong, what needs to be done, if anything. So being able to quickly slice by page type, search URL, category page, product page, and see which of those site sections is declining week on week, for example, and then alongside that be able to see whether there's an interest change, whether there's a ranking change, whether there's more rich results on the pages for those types of results, or cut by category and do the same thing. Being able to slice things in the ways that we need to slice them as a business is something that is helping us to get to those solutions and answers, before 10 a.m. on a Monday, so that our senior stakeholders keep the faith they have in us being able to understand the work that we're doing and the impact of it.
And Derek, I know that you might face slightly different challenges, but what kind of issues, in addition to the challenges, but what kind of issues of scale are you running into at Nozzle?
As you get bigger and bigger sites, you have to build out some sort of data warehousing solution, and that can help you solve a lot of these scaling problems. BigQuery is a fantastic resource for that. It's completely serverless and is hosted. And one thing that I find super interesting about BigQuery is kind of like Jordan mentioned, you have, especially when you have larger enterprises, you're not necessarily wanting to open up all of your data to whatever tool vendor there was. I feel like there's been a shift in the industry from, oh, I want my one suite that pulls in my analytics and Search Console and all the things and tells me what to see. And now we're seeing kind of that locus of power moving to business intelligence tools, Tableau, Power BI, Data Studio, whatever it is that you happen to use. And where I think BigQuery really helps with that is because it's a shared server solution hosted by Google. It lets you join across data sets without having to necessarily provide permissions. So you can join your Nozzle ranking data into your Google Analytics or to your internal revenue per page data without having to provide a tool vendor access to that data, but you can still have all the power of joining and querying that data as you want. So for me, that's really where the power is saying, okay, how can we join that data together to create something that none of those could have, some value that wasn't available in the individual silos.
And Jordan, actually, so when is it time to automate? How do you know, not only building custom tools, but how to automate those tools? How do you kind of weigh that?
Yeah, so we were actually going to approach a challenge probably very similar to what you were approaching, where we wanted to take all of our data sources from all the APIs, right, get our rankings data, pull it into BigQuery, grab our log file data, grab other crawling data from a crawling tool, and then keyword planner data or whatever, put it all together into one centralized data warehouse, and just let our analysts run free with it. And we scoped out the project, we mapped it. It was about 3 to 6 months of work for about 2 data scientists. And then we realized that in 3 to 6 months, we would have no findings to share with our team about SEO and what we could do proactively about our site. So we proactively decided not to build this like glorious data warehouse, perfect scenario, and instead to focus on individual analyses. And so we had the foresight to think through like, okay, what the structure might be eventually, but built it piece by piece, analysis by analysis. And so it hasn't necessarily been like huge automation, but it's more of a piece by piece. It's almost an agile approach, right? Breaking things down into sprints as opposed to doing a waterfall long methodology. So you could deliver something of value to the business over time.
And I know that's how we operate as an agency at Catalyst. There's sprints every single week. It might be something different, so good to know. Okay, so JR, is there a set of tools or a go-to tool that you've developed or that you use when engaging a new client? Is there something that you automatically go to?
I think the biggest tool is just automation of keyword and competitive research, just so we can go ahead and very quickly identify the universe. So obviously we use Search Console data and pull back as much data as we can possibly do. We'll augment it with Ahrefs, SEMrush data. And then internally, we have a proprietary clustering solution that finds the number of clusters that it needs. It's differentiable from k-means in that k-means you have to specify that I need 10 clusters, right? So if you have a competitive universe of keywords that has 500,000, a million different queries that a site is driving, you want something that's smart enough to be able to find the smart groupings of those keywords so that you're looking at and tracking, hotel rates in New York versus hotel rates in NY hotel rates, and all the different permutations of that. So I think that's one of the largest processes for onboarding, and those are the data sources, and just being able to distill down 500,000 keywords to maybe 500 distinct themes that you really want to look at, and removing the complexity of that.
And Derek, what kind of internal teams do you guys leverage at Nozzle?
Internal
teams, yeah. So do you have? Is it a lot of developers? How do you run your shop?
Yeah, it's so very engineering driven. We believe in open data. That's why we like making that BigQuery data available. There's no limitations. You can use an API, but so for us, that's the end goal of all data, regardless of which team it flows through or how they might be, processing that data internally. And then once it gets into BigQuery, that they also provide, you can do BigQuery inside of ML. So again, without having to have a fully trained data scientist, you can actually start to run a lot of these models and build them. And I believe it's on the roadmap to make them TensorFlow compatible, so that you can import and export from there and actually get into some kind of production workflow. Internally, our teams use Go on the back end. It lets us process at scale a lot faster than when we were we did some PHP way early on. Or Python is similarly can be much slower. I don't know if that answers your question about team management, but it's kind of like a data collection and then stitching that data together are pretty often separate processes.
And Jordan, is that different at apartments.com? How are you structured there?
So in terms of structure, I think I mentioned the four components of our team, right? So content, technical SEO, analytics, and then geographies. One thing, probably a value that we could share with the audience is, for a long time we thought that our SEOs, our technical SEOs, right, the most technical people who understand how to read and write some code, should understand data science and be able to do machine learning and be able to write app scripts and do all that kind of stuff. And I think we recently come to the realization that they shouldn't do that. They should know a little bit more about the business side and really be working on kind of stitching together across teams. And so instead of like having our data scientists build that huge data warehouse that we were talking about, we've been teaching our analytics team how to think about SEO. So we've been doing a lot more training, a lot more working side by side with them on stories for sprints that our analytics team runs. And so they're now learning what canonicalization means and how log files differ from other kind of hit or other visit level or session level data in Google Analytics, and how to turn all those things together. So from like a team organization side of things, I think we're doing more overlap between teams and sharing some skill sets that used to be siloed in SEO so that more people can understand them.
Yeah, and do you find that enables better communication across the teams? And are the tools that you're building, are they more enhanced because of that?
Well, it's slower. It's really it's much more efficient to be like that powerhouse SEO in the corner who just can do everything, right? And like all and can do all.
Like most
and
of these
really
people
fast
in the room.
Yeah, I think it's most of the room, right? So communication has been harder, right? It's slowed down communication, but it scales up over time. And then we have people, of course, who haven't thought about this from an SEO perspective that have like master's degree in computer science and other things who can create tools much faster and automate things like how to do keyword research and Google Keyword Planner much faster. That saves our team a lot of time on the back end. So I think it's created some tools that we didn't know were possible because we've shared our knowledge.
And do you have buy-in at the executive level? I know that that can be a challenge, especially if you're not able to demonstrate the value very easily.
Yeah, I mean, we have buy-in all the way up to the CEO of the company. Kind of, we have a directive to grow traffic, and that's one of the key things to sustain our business. And SEO is a key part of that.
Yeah. Claudia, how do you approach the executive level piece? I know that you're a little bit more, you run lean as well.
Yeah, so we have a 6-person in-house team, 4 of whom are focused on working with other teams, reviewing the pages they're creating, and sort of looking at our on-site content and internal linking and stuff. So in terms of analytics, it's me and with a little bit of support from our agency sometimes. In terms of the more senior stakeholders, we've gained a lot of credibility with them over the last few years. We had a bit of a crisis a few years ago and had to really go back to basics and build up our credibility with them again. And that's really been what we leverage through everything that we do, is making sure that we are making smart choices based on things that we can back up. There's having a lot of integrity about our view of the truth, facing into things that are challenging, and being able to get to answers as quickly as we can is kind of how we've managed to get those people on side. I think we're lucky that the people above us, so we're talking like head of e-commerce for the brand, that's what they value as well, because it works for me because that's what I value. But if we had somebody who was a little bit more cutthroat, who was more trying to present a particular image and needed us to kind of make everything look good all the time, I think we would have more of a challenge. But certainly leveraging the credibility that we've got and proving the benefit of things that we're doing and explaining our thinking, being able to really rationalize our approaches. We're lucky to have buy-in from them, but it's also quite hard.
Yeah. And Jared, is there something that you wish more SEOs were doing in terms of building different tools or using different tools?
Yes, I wish every SEO here would code in Python and post their code on GitHub so that I can reuse it.
Derek, how about you? Anything that SEOs aren't doing right now that you think they should be?
I agree. I think there's a lot of stuff that could be shared on GitHub, but since that's like a developer-centric community that SEOs haven't necessarily been that familiar with, it'd be great. I know I've seen some work. I know Mike King from iPullRank has tried to start some initiatives to get some data consistency or push some more data collection type solutions into GitHub. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And speaking of, who do you think is making the greatest advancements in those tools? In addition to iPullRank.
JR is a champ right here. That's why he's on the panel. I see a lot of advanced work coming from Paul and Hamlet and the people that are mostly speaking at this conference. So it's exciting to see machine learning and more advanced development techniques finally making it into technical SEO and not being quite the bridge or the chasm that existed before.
So interesting question. How do you guys deal with site audits? Do you have different processes for auditing? Do you have everything automated and when you do a site audit, when you have a new engagement or something like that?
So site audits, I guess going back to like before apartments.com was at agencies, and we did a lot more site audits a lot more frequently. One of my team members who's here with me, I was telling her when she was interviewing a couple years ago, like the nice thing about working here is you don't have to do big, huge site audits anymore. And I think that's a nice benefit about being in-house is you don't have to do a comprehensive. We can just do section by section of the site. We're still doing auditing. And I think the approach is topic by topic. It's taking a key takeaway from this conference and then running that against all the different sites in our networks and finding something completely different with every different website and a different application, and then kind of iterating from there. There's no specific tool. It's all the tools all the time, depending on the audit. So.
Yeah, it works. Anyone else have something to add to that?
Yeah, similar, being in-house again, similarly, we have our agency help us do some comprehensive audits on a sort of more spaced out basis, but we're doing the benefit of having built out our team to have 6 people now is that we are constantly cycling through them, but we're using more and more intelligence to work out when is the right time to do each of those things. We have a huge broad range of products that we sell. So there's certain points where we know that we need everything to be in its best shape on garden furniture, for example, by the end of February, because in the UK we may well have a heat wave in March. So the more information we have about when those peaks are, garden furniture is an obvious one, but for something like video games or nursery furniture, it's harder to know unless you're looking at that data and forecasting demand.
I'll add one more thing. Like tools are great, and that's why we have a panel all about tools. But some of the most value I get in auditing is just like looking at a page, thinking about, okay, what keyword would this page rank for? And you can go to Search Console and figure that out. And then just typing in the keyword. Like sometimes we forget to type in the keyword and look at the search results page. But I can name 3 or 4 instances over the past 2 weeks of us doing that and finding something important, just visually looking at it and using our SEO skills. So the tools find so much at scale, and there's so much value there, but you can't only use the tools.
Sure.
I would 100% agree with that, because I think you got to learn the site and you got to learn the users, and tools don't do a really good job with that. So I think actually going page for page and doing exactly that process, I don't think there's a workaround for that. I think automating processes further down that are mundane and embellishing them with data is helpful. But I think you need a little bit of humanity when you're reviewing a site in depth, especially if it's a new site.
Yeah, and I think it's easy, especially, I mean, I fell into this problem at SEO.com when we said, oh, we have all these things, we want to build out this suite of tools and it's going to be so amazing. But there's like the 80-20 principle that really holds true of, you can, with just 20% of the work, you can automate most of it and then let your SEOs and your experts that you have in-house take it that extra step of the way. And I would say often don't try and automate it all the way to the end, because you're going to end up spinning your wheels and you may not even end up with a product that makes sense. So if you can just get it far enough and take the workload from being repetitive from your SEOs and burning them out, and letting them focus instead on, what are exciting things, what value can I truly add, and not automating too early.
And I guess this question's for JR. JR, what's your, since you're the whiz kid, what's your greatest accomplishment, you think, in terms of tools and tool sets?
Y'all are about to see it tomorrow. No.
Yeah, don't spoil it too much.
That's difficult. I love learning, right? And I love technical SEO, and I love having access to data sets. But I think the biggest thing was taking the leap to leave. I was an architectural glass artist for 10 years and then became a developer. But I think being able to take a leap and move into an area like technical SEO, and then seeing the data science component of it come in, I think, fairly early, and having just week after week consistently trying to train new models, test new GitHub repos, see their application to SEO, test the effectiveness, I think has given us at Locomotive some really kind of novel and interesting tool sets. Like we have one tool that came out of just necessity, which is, takes Search Console data for 16 months. You can specify a change date, and then it heat maps Like if you redesigned a site, it'll heat map for like 12 months, and let's say you had change dated on month 8 of that, like it's a visual heat map of the query loss of your entire site, which that's so impactful to send to a new client and say, hey, here's your loss here, right? And then here's a spreadsheet with all the queries that you lost, right? So I think being able to quickly and iteratively pull together some really kind of unique things, and that cadence of discovering those new workflows every few months probably is where it's at right now.
Have you ever screwed up something so badly that you never recovered? Like, so for instance, we deleted 3 years worth of client data. This was a long time ago, Beth, wherever you are. A long time ago. We have safeguards in place now, but have you ever screwed up something like that bad?
No, I mean, I've had some pretty large overages on an AWS account, but I'm a really anxious person, so I'll be checking something at 3 a.m. in the morning. Did I do this? Did I do this? So I've always tried to make sure that we had backups, or I never wanted to get myself into a situation where it was something I could not recover from, and I've been pretty good at that so far.
And you spoke about that heat map. So I'm a big data viz guy. And this can be for anyone, not just Jared, but do you find that visualizing your data is much easier you're more easily able to communicate that data instead of like an Excel sheet or something like that?
Yes, for me, but I'm really interested at how you guys do that internally, especially through the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Data visualization is awesome, right? Power BI, Tableau, Google's Data Studio. Data Studio and all the other data visualization tools are tools. I think the other part that we focus on is a little bit more about information design, which is kind of the art part of data visualization. Like you can take any data source, throw it into a visual, but like picking what the right visual is for data. So we recently started something at apartments.com for our analytics team. It's like our data visualization or information design tip of the day, where one of our designers goes through and just pulls out one thing. Like the tip of the day last week was when you have just a normal line chart and you have 3 lines that are all kind of going the same direction, you have one line that's an outlier, like the 3 lines should all be the same color, and then the outlier should be like bright green or something. There's like little tips about like how to draw attention to data, how to communicate better. That's been really helpful for us. So like we have all the tools that we would ever need, but like having the hint and the insight about what technique to use to fit the model or to communicate, like that's where we found the most value.
So when I said it at the beginning, I didn't realize I was going to be circling back to this, but actually I think my background in teaching children and then also design means that I'm naturally really interested in making complex ideas accessible to people who don't have expertise and also making them look nice. So that's kind of just suddenly clicked into my head as to why I do what I do. I mean, we're talking today about what tools we've made ourselves, and actually the thing with the tool that I've made is that I've basically used existing functionality in Power BI to link all of our data sets together and to present them that way. So I've approached it from a data visualization point of view, looked at what I want to be able to show people visually so that they get the information they need and it has the impact it's needed to guide them in what action they should take or what they should understand about our performance from it, and kind of worked back from there as to what I need to do in the back end in order to be able to show that stuff and communicate it clearly.
One thing I think that's important is to have an expectation for what your data should look like. When, like Jordan mentioned, right, if you have the guy in the corner that knows all the things and knows where all the bodies are buried, and they can look at, some chart and be like, this is terribly wrong. But most of the people that you're sharing your visualization with aren't going to know that. And so if you can, set some kind of expectation or say, whether it's a trend line that I expect the data to look something like this, that can help you, especially if you're actually writing SQL queries or doing something to join data, or it's real easy to make a join in SQL return too much or too little data and skew it significantly. One that I see pretty often is when customers have multiple keyword groups for a single keyword and they want to track some SERP data. And when they join those keyword groups into the keyword, it actually pivots your rows down so that you end up with whatever your SERP data is times the number of keyword groups. And that just totally skews all of your output. It skews the number of clicks or whatever it is that you're, aggregating across. And so, but if you have, I expect the output of this to look like whatever, it's a really good gut check for you and for whoever's using your chart to say, is this an outlier or is it something like I expect?
Yeah, I have a really good example that happened. I think it was a couple months ago. We were our analytics team was challenged with how many users in the United States are we reaching? So we took some data from third-party providers. We put it all together. Over the past 12 months, we're reaching 450 million users in the U.S. It's great, but there are less than that many people who live in the U.S. and there are even fewer that actually live in apartments. So just because you get a number from stitching 12 months of data together doesn't mean it's accurate, right? Because users overlap months and things are counted differently. So yes, exactly what you said. That's great.
I know we're running up against time here. We have about 4 minutes left. So if I could just get your one takeaway when you're building SEO tools or when you're looking to develop something new, what would be your go-to? I can start with you, Derek, if you want.
For me, it's in a similar vein to what I just said, is make sure you know what your outcome is first. My general rule of thumb is I try not to automate something unless I've actually come across the same use case for it at least 3 times. Because if I haven't seen it enough times, then I probably don't understand the scope of the problem well enough to automate it. And whatever I choose to automate is probably going to, overfit to whatever the one scenario is that I was automating. So for me, it's most important to, again, decide ahead of time, this is my expectation of what the output looks like and what is the value that it's going to drive. When they talk about, what's your product market fit, it's easy to sell features and not deliver benefits. And so make sure that you're doing that, even if it's just an internal project, to say, not what is the feature of, this is going to be the best ML model, but it's, this is going to drive X amount of revenue or this amount of change in a conversion rate. And that is why I'm building this automation, or I'm saving X hours per site audit. So defining that ahead of time will let you know when you reach the end of your automation or end of your tool building, whether or not you were successful.
I would say, I think it's right. There has to be a reason why you're doing it, right? It has to either make a process better, more consistent, or save time, right? But I also think we have so many tools that I've built over the last couple of years that haven't been used in a year, right? Or since they were done. So I think usage is a good measure, especially in an agency, of do you create something, you tell people about it, and then do they actually use it in their work, right?
Do you want to share those with me so I can use them?
No. But yeah, that's mine.
I think my key takeaway would be that you don't have to think of yourself as a person who builds tools in order to be a person who builds a tool that adds value to what you're doing. My role in the team has been for a couple of years reporting. So there's a lot of Excel stuff, a lot of using the output from the out-of-the-box solutions that we'd got. And I basically learned how to use Power BI by watching Will Reynolds on YouTube and going to Reddit with specific questions of how can I do this? I don't know DAX. And so I think I would never have envisaged myself sitting on this panel a year ago. So I'm nowhere near where these guys are, but I've been able to create something that is used by tens of people around a company, saves a lot of time, and makes us more effective. So I think it's useful to think about what it means to make a tool and what it means to be somebody who can do that, because you can all do it.
Yeah, my tip, I think it's a branch off of what you said. It's when you decide there's something you need to build, don't start yet. Wait. Wait like a couple of days, a week, whatever it is. Do more solutioning. Do more. Come up with more ideas of how you could approach the problem. For example, like we were building a tool to look at content on our pages and link it to the most appropriate content on our site, right? Internal linking algorithm is what we call it, which is a great tool. And there's awesome natural language, NLP, natural language processing stuff, and machine learning work you could do with it. But after looking at the problem and not starting coding, we figured out that a regex was the best way to do it. And it was really clean and really simple, and it accomplished the goal, and it was much more precise than all the NLP work that we then later tried and failed on. Because NLP is really hard, as we just saw in a 30-minute presentation. It's really tricky. And you have to get it perfectly to make it make sense to users and for Google to trust it. So find the simpler solution, and that might not be exciting because you don't dive right in and code, but it's going to benefit you in the long run.
Well, I think that's it. I think we're out of time, but thank you, panelists, so much for joining us on stage, and thank you to the audience for spending 30 minutes with us. Thanks.
Hands up for questions, guys. Oh, right in the front. Perfect. Excuse me, Brielle. Go, Greg.
This question is for Claudia. Argos rolled out its annual Christmas video in early November.
Yeah.
Now, that's not on your website. It's over on your YouTube channel. But do you see a ripple effect? Do you measure the impact of that?
Yeah, we saw. I'm sure you've seen the video. Probably not lots of other people have. It's a man playing a toy drum kit, and then a child comes and joins him. We saw a huge spike in traffic for lots of drum kit related terms. We saw a spike. We basically looked at Search Console. We looked at which keywords saw a bigger jump in impressions and clicks that week, and it was a lot of branded stuff, Argos Christmas, Argos gifts, and lots of drum kit related things as well. I think we sold out of that drum kit. So we see the impact from it, even because it was also going out on TV shows as well. So yeah, we saw the impact of it without having it on our website. We were able to see the ripples that it produced. I would have liked to have seen it on the website, but yeah, we could definitely see what that did.
Any other questions for the panel, guys? More hands up. One.
If I can jump in real quick
Yep.
while you're passing that around. One thing I think it's important too, from a rank tracking perspective, is remember that you are a brand and not a domain, and not just look for where does Argos show up, but actually export your YouTube videos and see, are any of my YouTube videos showing up in the SERP, and is that potentially driving some of that traffic? So don't let yourself be confined to a single domain.
Yeah, so I got a question based on something Derek mentioned in the last point, which was about trying to figure out the benefits of a tool before you make it, which I think is a really good point. And it sounded like, hours that it'll save or revenue, things like that are good ways to figure it out. But I think sometimes figuring out like the actual benefit is ambiguous. It's kind of difficult. Do you have any methods that you use to try to, figure out what the actual benefit of making a tool would be?
I think it's a fine line, kind of like JR was talking about. There's a lot of value in okay, let me just dive in and spend an hour or a couple of hours trying out a bunch of approaches just to kind of scope out and understand the extent of the problem. And so I think there's a little bit of, there's a ton of value to be extracted from that work. And then once you feel like you've understood the problem scope, if you can't define a benefit after you've done that initial overview, then you probably shouldn't build the tool.
I would add one thing to that is one of the things that we tried to do was make it easy to access. I don't have to rebuild an API layer just to pull from Moz, or we have all that kind of commoditized in our data stack. So it's really quick for us to go in and spend 4 hours and test out a hypothesis, right? Let me just code this together. Let's execute it on a client. Let's measure it, right? Did it was it a positive impact or was it not a positive impact, right? Did it save time or did it not save time? So I think what Derek's saying is like, I do try to go in and do that exploratory and say, how much time is this going to take me, right? If it's going to take me, 40 hours, then we might outsource that, or I might have to double check whether we're going to actually build that. But if I can wireframe something as a proof of concept in 4, more than likely, I'm probably going to go ahead and do that if the idea is interesting enough.
Awesome.
But yeah, if you can't articulate the benefit, almost for sure, you're just doing it because it sounds exciting.
Cool. Last call for questions, guys. Any final questions for the panel? One more? Okay. This will be the last one, and then we're going to hand things back to Frank, who will introduce our next speaker.
Hi, I think this is for everyone up on the stage. What was something that you got super excited about and dumped a lot of time, energy, and resources into, only to have it mean absolutely nothing or be entirely useless? What was a big screw up that you did?
I can take one. This was luckily not at Nozzle, but it was at SEO.com. When I joined the company as the VP of Tech, they thought they had built the most amazing SEO solution, but really they built a task manager that was called Death Star because it blew things up all the time. And they had spent all of their dev resources for years into building something that was really just Asana that had some SEO tasks that could be easily dragged and dropped around. And it was a giant waste of time that they thought was SEO when it was, well, we just wasted our devs building a task manager.
Roughly a year ago, I set up some reporting that would run over a short period of time, and I set it all up in advance and then left it for my manager to run while he was in the office. And it turned out that it had been set up incorrectly, and because the period that I set it to run for was very short and obviously hadn't happened yet and therefore wasn't collecting data, I hadn't tested it thoroughly enough. It was Black Friday. I cried.
So we've been talking about tools for a while. We haven't talked about experimentation yet. So my biggest failure was a bad hypothesis for an experiment. Luckily, it was an experiment. We didn't implement it. But it was how to take content from an area that didn't have a lot of interest and traffic and get more traffic to another related area that was close by via redirects. And we implemented and traffic to those areas dropped 90% immediately. It all came back. And good thing it was a test. It was only like, 1 or 2% of our traffic. Yeah, make sure you have either an experimentation platform or a way to run experiments so you don't have big, massive failures. Or if they are, they're not noticeable. I thought it was a great idea.
I never have any failures now. Probably the last one, I spent probably 3 months with a data set of 150 million keywords that were pretty broad keywords, trying to match those to SERP features, and came up with like 2,200 unique SERP feature sets across a very large sample of those keywords, and did a ton of analysis on it with the goal of finding Google inferred other intent types other than your basic ones like transactional, informational, et cetera, to essentially extend those out from Google's data. Found 2 in 2 months, and it was not a great feeling. So that was mine.
I've got one other experience that a major U.S. telecom company, they spent a bunch of time building a brand new JavaScript site back in, I think it was in 2015, launched in January 2016. And they, with all of it, they delisted themselves from Google. And no one caught it until the accounting team that was doing their end of month stats were like, why did our web sales drop 10%? So they didn't have anything in place to catch that, which obviously is a lot of heads rolled after that. So JavaScript is better now, but be careful.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.